Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Inmendham. Yeah, still, for now, a little while longer yet. So, thinking about this week, no real theme except the frustration of just recognizing how difficult it is to communicate with human beings, any kind of sense of something. We really don't have the same way of interacting in the world. For every person, headache means a different thing. Some people headaches are migraines, some people headaches are nothing. There's no common language, and there's so little common interpretation of experience, you could argue, or even the having of the experience. For every person goes into it with a different anxiety, or they put too much pressure on themselves, or you can have an event, and for every person they'll be having a different experience. If you could make the event the same, they would all experience the same event differently, because of what they recognize as risks, or what they don't see. The risks they don't see. Really, that's the whole problem, is, I would argue, for most people that are creating the problem, that is, young people having kids, and when they really have no idea what they're getting into, what they're imposing, more specifically. I mean, they're getting into something that will consume their life, and they really don't recognize that, nor do they recognize how bad it can go, how dysfunctional families get. None of that stuff is being appreciated as they're marching into the adventure. And then the real guilty party are the fakers, the people who do have some age and distance from their kind of delusional ambitions, and recognize that life is a lot gnarlier and messier than they certainly anticipated. And they just lie and keep selling how great it all is, even though they know it wasn't so great. So I was thinking of comparisons to, like, movies. Like, every individual's life is a movie of a sort. You're having an adventure, and so it's like everybody's life is a little story, and most of the stories are being written and directed by a kind of Borg, a Borg of themes and notions and ideas. Some of them quite silly, the whole religion thing, which, it's hard to imagine adults, brains that have been around for a while, asserting with any confidence notions of a God for whom we're playing his, role-playing for his benefit or something. Somehow living our fake, unnatural lives in our, little facades, the pretense of our manicured lawns and such, that somehow there's some sort of rational vision that this is a great role for humans to play, being a domestic on planet Earth, being a slave to a life that's just so fake and false and make-up. It's all fool the other guy. It's all pretend, and they actually think that like something intelligent would say, yes, this is what I'm going to do with these kind of curious and creative animals. I'm gonna have them live in their little boxes on little streets with way too much garbage and cars in the way. And have to play all kinds of silly games to maintain their life, keep the roof over their head, so to speak. Horrible. So even to imagine that there was some intelligence that destined us to this mediocrity, to play these stupid roles, even to be a sheep herder, all of it is, mundane and as a movie would suck. Sheep herder, you don't want to be in that movie. You don't want to be in most of the movies. Bus driver, doing the same shit every day. Whatever. Just anything, any one of those movies, you just don't want to be in them. So anyway, but just the idea that people can't, let go of some necessity to cling to some hope that the story's going to get better, or that the God who has sentenced them to this life somehow has a better plan for him, somewhere else. It's a much better, much better pinball machines to play or something. How they fall for that? Silly. But that's what you're up against, right? So, billions of people on Earth are so stupid that they can't even figure out that that's a big frickin' lie. Even though it's so obvious, it's a big frickin' lie. It's obvious from its source. Even the funny racist types who, can't stand people from certain regions of the world, and yet their savior is from those places. It doesn't make much sense. It's just so, there's no sense to it. And you're just, these are the people I have to somehow say something or do something or some pantomime, and they'll get it. I don't know. It doesn't sound like that's very probable. But that's all we got. So, that's the plan. So the idea would be to tell them a story. Present them a play like Romeo and Juliet, where they can maybe appreciate the tragedy of it all, get a sense of it through the vicarious process of, watching and tying their narrative to another narrative, the story, and see if they can get a feel for this idea that you don't sell something this poisonous, this dangerous, this unreliable. It's it's something that can blow up in their hand, blow their face off. You wouldn't sell that to somebody, right? you really wouldn't. If you knew it had a 50-50 chance of blowing their face off, a decent person would say, no, I'm not going to sell that to anybody. But that's what people are doing right now. They're selling this propaganda. The Borg just keeps pretending that we're accomplishing, that somehow all these bad movies we're producing, our role in them, we're acting in, are somehow winners, and they're not winners, they're losers. Most of them, all of them will be losses in the end. Just either you will destroy something of value, or you will be destroyed in a very negative value way. I mean, it's one or the other. Something's going to get you. The seeds of the negative poison will affect every life, and usually, I think inevitably, in some sort of manner where the better to never have been. It's just going to be messy. So part of it you can just think of in terms of the people who do have children, and they have that future liability. So everything that happens to all of their descendants is essentially their fault. So in some respects, everybody who has kids and the prospect that their kids will have kids are essentially going to sentence some generation to have to be tragically annihilated by the universe when it decides to get around to giving us what is inevitable: the comet strike, the radiation storms. There'll be something long before, it won't take that many thousands of years, tomorrow even. But that's what they're so that's one inevitable death. But there's all the regular just life stuff. All of their prodigy they have sentenced to death, and many of those deaths by just probable circumstances will be quite nasty. And some of them will be, horribly disabled or in some other way afflicted and go through much anguish and torture. And it's essentially all on them, their fault. They made it reality. They took it from could be and made it a will be. And so even if they have an otherwise decent life, they're never going to be able to pay back the indecency of the harm they will cause. And it would be silly, I think, for people to say that somehow it all works out somehow. That somehow the real tragic parts are just a tiny little price you pay, and all the fun stuff is just so much, it's just so fantastic that it's certainly worth watching your sister die. In a horrible way. That somehow there'll be something I'm going to do in my life that will make that, that was worth it. And I got more to watch, right? If I live, I have to watch them die, or they have to watch me die. It's how can you possibly win? There's no way of winning. And like a movie, it's the game is really just getting to the end of the movie, right? There's always this idea that movies kind of set themselves to have a small agenda. The end is a clear victory, and then you can say, "Yay, we won!" and you wave a flag at the end of the movie, and there's some victory, right? You get the girl you're in love with, or you beat the bad guys, and save the world, or whatever the bullshit is. But you don't have to wake up the next day, So it's one of these happily ever after things where the pretense is the next day there isn't some new adventure that's not going to be nearly as much fun. And many of these sequels to your story aren't going to be great sequels. They're just not. Some of them are going to be crappy. You're going to have crappy days, crappy weeks, crappy months, crappy years, crappy decades. Be part of the whole collection. So the collection's not going to contain all top 10 hits. There's going to be lots of crappy crap in there. And I'm just thinking about the mathematics. Like, you can't really compare it to records because you don't have to listen to bad songs. But what if you had to listen to them? It's then you'd be more, you'd appreciate it. And that's really the point, is that most people do just live in denial. They just take the negatives and bury them. Literally, we bury them. and we bury it, hide it, you know, make it pretty, so it can go away. And you know, it's cheating the truth, and cheats our intelligence, cheats fairness. And I guess most people do that when it comes to, you know, they're eating animals and doing all this stuff, and they just make excuses that, you know, you know, they just make excuses. Everybody else is doing it. You know, it's hard for me to even imagine when I was one of them, you know, making excuses. So, you know, it's just such a long time ago since I didn't feel uncomfortable. I mean, it took me a while. You know, when I became uncomfortable when, you know, I was probably 7 or 8, and I didn't deal with that in any kind of rational way. I just, well, I've, you know, been programmed. The director and the producer and, you know, and the writer of the script all say I'm supposed to do this, so I'm going to do it. And I didn't have enough, you know, I didn't have enough clout in my own mind to be able to say I'm right and they're wrong, you know, or these rational thoughts I have that this can't be right are in fact rational, and it's not right, and you know, got to do something about it. So yeah, so it's again just about, you know, appreciating that everybody is invested in their life, you know, and if you're arguing that life sucks, you're not really arguing that the process of living at any one moment sucks, or that the idea of adventure sucks, or the idea of curiosity sucks, or the idea of being challenged. Competition, you know, that's sort of what drives us. We're very competitive, and people fight against the negatives in life. And there's nothing wrong or stupid or even unnatural about that process. There's a sort of dignity in being a fighter. But it should only be done on this personal, emotional level, and it shouldn't be something people argue as a philosophy, that somehow because they feel alive and they feel like they're making a good movie, that they don't really know, no, it's not a very good movie. It really doesn't have much of a plot. You know, just some silly little ambitions, getting this, having this, like somehow I'm going to be happy, but it doesn't really always, very seldom works out that way. And you know, you're just, you do the best you can, you know, day to day. And that's, I think, how most people are living. And there's no, you know, to say life is stupid is not to say that your life is stupid, or that, well, it is to say that you're being stupid if you can't recognize that you are just being played, that, you know, this is just a dumb script you're reading, you know, written by circumstances, you know, what country you were born in, what language you speak, what education you've had, what opportunities you had. Did you have a rich uncle, got you a job somewhere? Did you have this? Did you have that? You know, that wrote your script. I mean, it was crap that wrote it. You know, but I'm not saying you shouldn't feel like this is an important script and that this is an important movie. You know, you should be a good actor. Be a good actor. But the argument is that's on your personal level. But if you're going to be philosophical, if you're going to give somebody or the world advice, you necessarily need to be more honest and not speak from the player caught up in the game, and recognize that, oh yeah, I can recognize, okay, I might be a football player, but I can recognize football's stupid. I mean, back and forth, what is this shit? So, little soap opera, over and over and over again. For what? Nobody ever scores, in any sense, where, oh yeah, that's it, we finished. No, there's never any finish. Never finishes. You just stop and then start over again. It's just stupid. So they should be able to acknowledge that, these people, especially these people who have seen some of this firsthand, right in their face kind of horror, should be able to admit that, yeah, okay, I'm yeah, I get it. I'm in a movie. I think it's really cool, but yeah, it's really crap. I get that. They can, what's the big deal? So, yeah, so that's it. So I've just been thinking about how the idea of stories should be able to connect people, people have always liked doing that, storytelling stuff. Storytelling has always been sort of important in terms of, pulling on people's emotions, connecting them, making them feel like they belong. All of that kind of stuff is created by, having these common stories and having themes and stories about great David and Goliath victories or something, or some kind of crap like that. I mean, I guess that's part of the Borg, though, yes, because those stories do have a happily ever after element to them all that just is so unrealistic. And so people have this notion that it's all going to work out because it worked out once, in human history. Because there's one example of somebody winning in some real way. Therefore, everybody won. When, the truth was never that. It's crap. Nonsense. So that's the ambition, is to attempt to describe our adventure here as living organisms on planet Earth in some sort of realistic way, where you accept our biological origins, our fact that we were fish. Our ancestors were fish. I mean, you can follow the trail all the way back to a fish. Okay? And the only neat thing about it, I suppose, is we all have the same fish mother, so to speak. We have a common fish ancestor, so that should connect us to each other. Because, our great fish was the same fish. We're like brother and sister, or brother and brother, or brother and whatever. Not one of those two things. So yeah, I don't know how I'm saying, but I'm just saying that's sort of how you have to do this storytelling. You have to somehow make it generic, and so everybody can see how their narrative fits into this narrative of our reality, and does it in a way where we can maintain our dignity, and not be, sort of defined as assholes by the script, by the plot, even though we are. So that's the hard part. Is it's really hard not to see that the only thing keeping this engine going is ignorance and belligerence and recklessness. I mean, it's all negative stuff. There's no good engine here. And so it's hard to tell the story without kind of pointing your finger and saying, yeah, it is your fault. You are an idiot, an asshole. You're just so clueless. You have no appreciation for what's really happening. And, yeah, you suck. You're just like blight. So, but see, you can't do that. You can't tell the story that way because, people need to be flattered. Yeah. Brutal truth just doesn't work. I guess, that's the funny part, I guess, is that, see, it did for me. I was easily humiliated, by the truth when I would recognize it here or there, and it worked. It said, oh yeah, you are an asshole, and all that stuff had a real effect on me, those negative thoughts. And, people would say, well, that's exactly why you're negative. Well, yeah, exactly. It's because it does work on me. I don't, you can't, there's a point where you can't pretend. Just like with the meeting, there was a point where I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't pretend this doesn't matter. Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah, of course it does matter. It matters. It's stupid to say it doesn't matter. It matters. So, if this wasn't a dilemma, then it wouldn't take me 10 years of making YouTube videos to sit here and say I'm frustrated because I can't figure out how to do this, how to accomplish this task exactly. But I think it does need to be done in this, unfortunately, just having a direct conversation about how the universe functions, how mechanical it is, that determinism is unavoidable logically. You can't avoid it as the truth. That we are just evolved animals, and that most of our motivating mechanism is incredibly crude, has nothing to do with intelligence, and that we're essentially just using our intelligence to scheme gratification of the crude lizard almost inside of us. So it's like giving the lizards the nuclear bomb, giving our lizards intelligences. What's the point? They won't use it for anything good because they're too stupid. And they're too crudely motivated, too selfish, too ignorant of what's going on. That's why you can't give, like, hyenas the nuclear bombs, because they would just blow up the lions with them or something. They're too stupid to know what it represents. Yes, I mean, so that real story about how we're just, how we've, really insulted the dignity of intelligence by having it and using it so poorly, that we've disgraced it, and violated it by being very, by not having enough respect for the difference between our capacity to understand and our capacity to want, and very different things. So you can't tell the true story. And that's the story I kind of know, and I'd like to just point it out, and be done with this. Just do the physics and the biology, and then the psychology, and then we have a tiny bit of extra philosophy to do on top of that, because those things kind of take care of explaining why we're motivated, that we are competitive animals, that we're made to survive, and that we're kind of designed not to be comfortable. Being comfortable means you don't do anything. That means you starve to death. That means you don't have a roof, that means a lot of things. So being comfortable isn't what we're designed to be. We're designed to be uncomfortable and motivated. We're designed to compete. And that isn't a good thing when we're competing against essentially our own brothers and sisters, our own fellow fish of the past anyway. I mean, that's, the Europeans came to North America and they didn't recognize their own relatives. 20,000 years ago, they were brothers and sisters. They didn't recognize, had no clue. So they're killing their own nephews in a way, and their own cousins, killing their own relatives. Yeah, you could just go into all the horrors of the past. And, oh, shit. Again, there's nothing we're doing. There's none of these B movies we're producing. No, we're acting in. None of them are good enough for the movies that are really bad. The really horror movies. There's just no making up for the damage done by the human centipede movie, or whatever. You can't fix that. There's no good enough to undo those bads. And so that's the simple story being attempted to be told. People who appreciate that most of the simple kind of asymmetry argument where you recognize that most of the things we call good are just the elimination of the things that are bad. That we're really not winning. We're just getting whipped less, and calling that a victory. So being less poor, less diseased, less weak, less sick, less all the things, and say, I win because I'm less of that. That's not really a victory. And so understanding that futility that's built into this function, that it really doesn't have a function. We're just evading negatives. We're really not moving towards any positive. We're not going to be able to save the day. We're just going to be able to prevent a worse day. That's, and we prevent the worst day by not trying to save tomorrow. If we let go of tomorrow, then there won't be any tomorrow to be fixed. That simple theme needs to be put into a story that, first feeds on people's notion that they're in a good movie, that there's an adventure here, really worth living, experiencing, pretending you're surprised when you had no reason to be. So, but that's sort of the problem, because you can't. It's like making arguments against religion. I mean, I could say that people, there's just no rational reason to do this religion thing. There just isn't any. But there's billions of them who will sit there and obstinately argue that somehow they know. For sure. The evidence somehow overwhelms them, and the evidence is so horrible. If they were telling, if the people of 2,000 years ago were telling them some other truth, some negative truth, they wouldn't believe it. They'd say, well, that's just crap, stupid, dumb, retarded, if the rule was, something that like chocolate is evil, they'd find a way to say, no, it isn't. It's just such bullshit. Just these old, stupid little stories, stupid stories. They're not even, you know, they don't have any connection to being realistic. It's like the Santa Claus and the rest of it. It's so overdone that how could you take it realistically? You know, they never make these fantasy characters. They never give them mortal powers. You know, they always have to be Superman or, you know, some kind of super technology man, certain something. You know, it's always got to be this little bit too much. It makes it all so unrealistic. But yeah, that's such a daunting task to think that there's any way. I mean, people who are that, I think, rationally deficient, that they fall for some sort of idiotic, Borgy programmed religion that's only just been passed on like I can't even think of anything that's passed on that's such rubbish. No, we don't pass on stuff this bad. You know, it's just such a piece of crap. And, you know, people give it to their kids like it's a gift. Yeah, I'll give you some stupidity. A stupid notion to have in your head to make you think everything's all right when it's not. I mean, it's almost cruel. But again, they can't be cruel because they're too stupid. You know, they're like some dumb animal, you know, killing another animal because it just doesn't know any better. It doesn't know it's hurting anything. I mean, they're that stupid. And that's, you know, it's like the kind of thing where you can't fight irrationality with rationality. It's almost like, well, that just can't work, right? Because if they had any capacity to do any of this simple reasoning, they would have never fallen for something so stupid. So, you know, what hope is there? So that's why you need something disguised. Yeah, that weans them slowly to reality, with a bunch of plot twists and whatnot. Something like that. So, that's about it. I don't know if I need to drag it out any further. I have thought of different stories, you know, maybe ways of telling the story, but I have to do more. I have to make it a more deliberate effort, I suppose, to attempt to take these elements that I think are essential to understand, you know, the bastard origin of the living organism, and, you know, understanding how it would have happened to anything that got intelligence. It would have had this dilemma of having this biological agenda crudely defined to accomplish an end, which is just make copies and die, and somehow make that story sound like a good idea. Oh, I make copies and I die. Make copies, die. Make copies, die. that's an accomplishment. But that's all that's the only biological agenda, is, you know, just to compete with the other things making copies and dying, and do it a little better than they're doing it. And that's a really dumb plot. And so you just take those elements and put them into a story where you could fight these individual truths about how flawed this game is, but in the end, you know, it's all tied up, and you say, okay, I'll concede. I'll recognize that my life had meaning. My experience was valuable. But I was just forced to play a dumb game. It's not a good enough game. There's nothing wrong with me. There's something wrong with the game I'm being obliged to play. And there's no logic to thinking the game is going to be better. It's always the same game. It's always a bad game. There's no better place to play it. There's no better way to play it, because it's just a dumb game. And you can't win it. And there'll be no ultimate touchdown. There'll be no perfect goal. There'll be no durable love. It won't happen. It'll always fall through your fingers and be lost. All the money will evaporate. It all falls apart. So that'll be the big ending. It's just recognizing that and saying, look, okay, it's not a commentary about the stories humans lived, and saying those were rubbish, that the living was rubbish, the game was garbage, and unfortunately, because of the way we're made, there's no good game to play, because the game really is just about competing and creating losers. So you can say, I lost less than he did. And that's essentially always going to be the standard. I lost less than him. It's not hard to figure out how, if we're brothers or equals, you can't win doing that. Can't win. Yeah. So I think yes, I'll cut it shorter than usual. First, I'm tired, and as soon as I say I'll cut it shorter than usual, it means I'll probably go in for 10 more minutes, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, it is a strange time, just for me personally. Life, so yeah, it's weird. That's all I can say. So it's very difficult to just fall into my old habits, and that might be a good thing. Change is, who knows, right? Could be good, could be bad. I tend to think it's usually negative, because you usually spend a bit of time trying to make things secure and stable. Change, like if you're on a boat, change usually means something bad, like it's going to sink. Boats don't fly, or so it's like it's very difficult to improve on something you've engineered to be stable, and it's very easy for you to hit an iceberg. So that's all. I'm just saying I'm a little bit iceberg shy and distracted by a lot of stuff. Just this whole getting old thing, and the fact that it has been 10 years of attempting communication in a pretty unsuccessful manner. These are all things that are just circling in my peripheral vision, statements about commentaries, and but like I said, some of that I'm not negative on. I think I've done all right in some respects. I mean, I've done my part. I've acted my role. I'm waiting for the director, to call in the extras and the other stuff that's supposed to happen to make the story work. So I can't do the rest of the production. Some of it is out of my control. I can only do my part. And part of me thinks I've done that better than other people. Yeah, right? That's going to be the standard again. So, you know, I'm just trying to say it's not like I'm depressed. I'm something else. I'm, you know, despondent. I don't know. Some other kind of discouraged, but not unmotivated. You know, it is a bit of a duality where yeah, part of me thinks I have such a great grasp on all of it. It's like I don't know if you were juggling and you know you really feel it. You're just feeling it. You're just or bowling or anything. You're in the zone. But the problem is that the stuff you're juggling is changing. You know, it's not stable. And so even though you have a sense of your skill, you don't seem to have an ability to the world changed. The game changed. Yeah, maybe that's the way to say it. It's like they changed the rules. It's like you were a great home run hitter in baseball or something, or you're just getting to the idea where you're really getting a feel for it, and they changed the rule and say you can only use 10-inch bats or something, and it was just like, yeah, I don't know, how do you do it with 10-inch bats? Something like that. You know, we have to wear lead shoes or something. So I just feel like I'm, you know, mechanically disabled, not motivationally disabled. Something like that. Yeah, maybe not. Yeah, anyway. So yeah, that's enough of a video, I think. Preaching to the choir, you know, which I have to somehow get out of the church. Find a mechanism that leaks, make a spell, you know, and you know, some sort of vapor that seeps, you know, across the land and infects people. You know, come up with some better weapon than merely expressions of the thoughts rolling in my head. You know, something more effective than analyzing and describing, because that's not enough. Probably. I mean, it probably would be enough if I were, you know, a celebrity, right? That would probably make the difference, right? So all you have to do is be a celebrity. So if we get a few celebrity endorsements, then you're on the way. Something like that. So anyway, it's disgusting how the world works. Yeah, mostly. So that's probably enough. So till the next time, you know, I keep intending to make more videos. But yeah, see, I guess it's just like I don't, you know, I'm not in the zone. You know, it's feels more awkward than it should, than it did, and you know, part of that is the redundancy, and I have to do something about that. Yeah. So anyway, that's, you know, gotta work on it. I have to come up with a plan that cannot possibly fail. You know, are more plans. I have some plans, it's just they seem to be failing, even though they cannot possibly fail. So I have to come up with some new, better plans that cannot possibly fail. It's a line from a movie, Clouseau. Yeah. Even watching some of those comedies, that are basically fail movies, movies that just illustrate how ludicrous so much of our life is. You'd think even that would be enough to get some people to fess up that, oh, this really is too sick a joke to impose on another generation. But they just keep doing it. It's like you could just go with the satire, and that should be enough. You shouldn't even have to show people the horror movies. The satire movie should be enough to convince them that, yeah, we really are silly, too silly, that this really isn't good enough. But it doesn't work for whatever reason. It doesn't work on them, clearly. So you have to try a new pill. Or whatever cliche fits. Yeah, okay, so we'll call it a video. So, till the next time, I intend to be more communicative with the world, but yeah, I'm busy with all kinds of, got all kinds of crap. There's a lot of extra little crap in my life. So, yeah, it's just absorbs my energy, something like that. Okay, so that's enough. So, till the next time, and such.